Hi, and welcome to the Dog Sports Decoded podcast. I'm the host, Megan Ritchie. If your dog has been struggling with finding a new back-to-work routine with COVID and all this, if you're finally ready to go back to work or are back at work and your dog's been having a hard time with it, I wanted to create today's podcast to give you some different tips and resources that you could use to help them get over their stress and also let you leave the house a little bit more guilt-free. So I've got a whole bunch of different products I want to tell you about today, and then some different resources that you can use that will hopefully help as well. So I'm just going to quickly flip over to this little PowerPoint and show you what we're going to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Kong, kind of the classic Kong. This is sort of the king of all dog toys in my opinion, and if you can only buy one of these, that is definitely the one that you're going to want to pick up. So we're going to talk about the Kong, how to use it, and when to use it maybe. We're also going to cover some of the sort of toys that are similar to it, the Squirrel Dude and the Kong Genius, and some different ways that you can use those to maybe bridge a gap if your dog is having a little bit of trouble with the Kong. And then we're also going to talk about some different feeding balls and toys. So that's what we're going to cover today, just how you can use them and how they can help you and your dog. So that's it. So if you haven't seen a Kong, which I'm sure most of you have, it's going to look something like this. I believe this is the medium size. This is the size kind of Tess and Riggs used as puppies, or just as they got out of puppyhood. So they're both using a large now, but they did use, Tess especially used a medium for a long time, and Riggs is here popping his nose in because we've got toys here to show you today. So if you're not familiar with the Kong, it's got a hole in it, a really big opening that your dog will use, and then a smaller opening at the other end. So some people will recommend you can put like a little treat in there to block that, and then you're going to stuff the main part of your Kong with whatever you choose to stuff it with. But that's what we're talking about today. You've probably seen these a bunch of different places. As far as toys go, I would say it's probably the #1 recommended toys that you'll hear of from maybe a puppy class instructor, your veterinarian, or sort of any sort of dog trainer if you're dealing with separation anxiety, whatever issue you're dealing with. A Kong's going to be probably one of the top recommended toys to solve whatever the problem is. So very popular toy. There are definitely some knockoffs that you can purchase if you choose. There's a lot of people that have tried to imitate them. I'm talking about the Kong because that's what I'm familiar with, and I think they're #1 for probably a good reason. They're about as durable as you can come. They come in different varieties, so I'll just flip back over here for a second here. So the classic is the red that I just showed you. There's an extreme version which is black, and that's typically for stronger chewers, more destructive chewers, bully breeds, but you know, just any dog that's going to be a little bit more destructive. I did have to move Riggs to the extreme. He was destroying some of the puppy Kongs, so I didn't want to take a chance. So he uses the extreme, but Tess uses the red Kong. They come in a variety of different sizes, but these are sort of the different, I'll say, rubber categories. So the classic is the red, the extreme is the black, and then puppy is typically kind of a marbly pink or blue, and senior is going to be purple. So the senior and puppy are both a little bit softer rubber. To be a little easier on sort of puppies' jaws as they're teething, and then the seniors who maybe have different gum issues that they might be dealing with. So, you know, even though they're sort of named that, you can use whatever you choose for your dog that they like. So, like Tess I think prior to Riggs coming home, I still would feed her out of a puppy Kong on occasion if that's what happened to be at hand or clean or whatever. So, you know, if they're gentle on toys, you probably can go with any of them. But, you know, if you're unsure and you have an adult dog, I'd start with a classic. And if you know you have a dog that has a tendency to be a little tougher on toys, I would just skip right to the extreme. So, so those are the two I'd recommend. So what do we use them for? So initially, or I would say the primary purpose for most of us is going to be when we leave the house. So, with COVID going on, if you're ready to leave the house in the morning, you're leaving your dog, they're struggling being home all day. You can hear them barking and crying as you leave the house, or they're scratching at the door and won't even let you out of the door. A Kong can be a great way to overcome that. Typically I'd say I've found that if you can keep your dog distracted for that first sort of 5 to 15 minutes that you're leaving the house, they're going to be fine the rest of the day. It's usually that first period right after you leave that they're the most stressed and are either going to do the most damage to your house or work themselves up. Once they're kind of accepted the fact that you're out of the house, they're typically fine. It's usually that first sort of 15 minutes that's the real challenge. So that's where a Kong can really help. I know with my own guys, every morning when I leave, I stuff a Kong for each of them. A little bit different, I'll say, recipe for both of them, but I'll get into that in a little bit. But they both get a Kong and they practically kick me out of the door. They're ready to eat it. They know they get it. They're excited for it, so they both will run into their kennel, get their Kongs, and I can leave kind of peacefully, and they've got something to keep them busy, rather than fret about when I'm coming home. So, if they've got something they can concentrate on by the time they're finished, and they realize I'm not there, it's no big deal. They've kind of de-stressed by eating and chewing. They're laying down, they're calm. So I'd say for most of any of you listening, that's probably going to be the primary purpose, but they really solve a whole lot of problems. So I've kind of talked a little bit about sort of more mild case of separation anxiety, when you leave the house. So that's certainly something you can use them for, but that you can just use them for regular feeding. If you have a dog that eats really quickly, you can stuff a Kong for them. That's going to take longer for them to de-stuff than sort of a traditional bowl. So that's something else you can use it for. You can certainly just stuff it for entertainment if you have guests coming over or something like that, and you just want to keep your dog, maybe quiet or out of the way a little bit. You can take them to their dog bed. Even if you just smear some peanut butter inside this, you can let them lick it out, and by the time that your guests are seated and in the house, they've calmed down a little bit, and they've, if they're on their dog bed, they've let your guests kind of come in a little bit easier than jumping around and getting all excited. So you've given them something positive to focus on instead. So that can definitely be another use. Some other great things, the tips I've learned probably over the last couple years that I hadn't thought about before. But if your dog struggles going to the vet, the groomer, something like that, it's a busy kind of scary environment. If they're still willing to eat, like if they're not so nervous that they won't eat, if you can get them to eat out of a Kong, that's great. You can sit in the waiting room and just hold a Kong kind of on your lap, and they can just lick out whatever you've put in there. If you've put in a little bit of canned dog food or like I said, peanut butter, Cheese Whiz, something like that, they're probably going to be a little bit happier in that waiting room with all that commotion going on. So that was a phenomenal tip that Carly Ainsley had shared actually in one of our earlier videos with High Drive, I guess. But that was a really neat trick that she had shared with us, so that's a real positive one you can use. And also in blinds, if you're waiting for your turn at a trial and your dog's having a hard time with all the distractions around them, same idea as the vet clinic. You can just put a little bit of peanut butter or Cheese Whiz in there and kind of have them pay more attention to that Kong, pay attention to you a little bit more, rather than everything else that's going on around them. So for our reactive dogs, that's a super easy hack that you can use to make that a little bit less stressful. So I think that's a great thing to do. So lots of uses for the Kong, really. Like I said, anything from just slowing down them eating, extending their meal time, so just kind of giving them a little bit more mental exercise if you don't have that opportunity. I know often I come home from work and, I'm tired, I'm busy, I'm cooking dinner. I don't have, immediately upon coming home, I don't have a lot of energy and attention to give them. If I can give them their dinner time meal in their Kong, that's going to keep them busy and occupied for a little bit while I finish up with dinner and get a few things done around the house before we have a chance to go for our walk. So that's great. So lots and lots of uses for a Kong, and that's one of the reasons, like I said, it's definitely, if you can only buy one, it's definitely my recommendation. There's so many uses for it. I know I kind of taught, when I only had tests, there was more of an opportunity to kind of play around with different training things around the house, and now with both of them, it's definitely harder because they both want to get in there and get treats and see what the other one's doing. But when it was just tests, I had her where I'd come home, she'd go get her Kong for me, show off. She was very proud of herself. I'd go, put a couple treats in for her and give that to her, and she just loved that, to the point where she'll even just pick up a Kong to go play in the house with, and kind of play fetch with. So once they love their Kong, there's kind of no end of uses for it. There's a aqua Kong that we use for the water that she loves, and I'm sure that's just because of the association with feeding the Kong every day. So the Kong, definitely my favorite, and if you can only have one, that's the one to get. I've got a resource on the High Drive website. If you go to myhighdrivedog.com, on the main page you should see a free resource. You just have to enter your email address and we'll email it to you. But it gives you a whole bunch of steps you can go through, sort of step by step, from your dog never having a Kong before to loving their Kong. So I've given you a bunch of different recipes. I think it's 21 days off the top of my head. And it just, from easy recipes to more difficult recipes. So I've kind of broken it down in that guide into 3 different categories. So there's sort of the beginner category where you're just kind of loosely stuffing it so that your dog can get used to it and learn how it works. And it kind of keys them into, they start to love their Kong and sort of anticipate that, oh, I get food with this toy. So that's a great way to introduce it. And then we get some more difficult recipes where you can start stuffing it more, making it a little harder for the food to come out. They have to work a little bit harder for it, to even more difficult, where maybe you're freezing the Kongs. So there's sort of different levels within that. Lots of different options for what you can put in. If you feed kibble, my top recommendation is to put their regular kibble ration in. It's super easy. If you usually feed them, I'll say 2 cups of food a day. Maybe put 1 cup aside for their Kong, and then give them a half a cup in the morning and a half a cup at night. So you're not having to give them extra food or extra treats and packing on the calories. And it's just an easy way to monitor how much they're eating, and still get some really positive use out of these toys. So if you do feed kibble, kibble's a great option. If you feed raw, it's still a great option for your dogs, raw or cooked. I've used it for both the kibble and the raw, and cooked as well. If you do feed raw or kind of homemade diet, Kong is probably one of the few toys you can actually use to stuff and feed in sort of that way where you want to give them something to enjoy while you're going to work. So for raw feeders, it's really a godsend, because there's not a lot of other toys out there that your dog can enjoy and that will kind of help them deal with any of that separation anxiety, or prevent it. But for kibble feeders, they're phenomenal. So I think one of the biggest problems I see people have when they use the Kong, maybe they've heard from a trainer, a veterinarian, that they should get one, or the breeders told them they should get one. And you should, but I find often that's where the advice ends. So they kind of tell you, like, oh, you should get one, and so you do, you go to the store, you pick one up, and then you show it to your dog, you give it to your dog, and your dog's like, oh, okay, well, great, but 10 minutes later, that's not much fun. It's not like a tennis ball, or it's not going to roll around a whole lot. So they might play with it for 10 minutes and then they're kind of bored of it if you don't stuff it and know how to sort of introduce it properly. So I find that's where a lot of people understandably fail, because nobody's told them how to introduce it. So that's one of the reasons I put that guide together, to kind of show you some steps you can take to introduce the Kong in a positive way that will encourage them to want to use it all the time and really come to love it. So just going to kind of quickly go over it here, but if I was starting with a new dog, what I would do is just grab my Kong, and I'm going to put a couple of loose treats in it. So maybe grab 5 treats. We're not talking many. put them in the Kong, put it on the floor, give it to my dog, and hopefully the dog will kind of investigate it themselves. Pretty much as soon as they bat it or nose it, most if not all of the treats are going to come out, and that's kind of what I want at this point. So that's all I'm going to do. First time I introduce it, put a couple treats in there, or if your dog's a real food hound, you can probably just go directly to kibble, but just a couple in it first. You don't need to put in a whole lot, and the real reason for that is just so you can get extra repetitions. So if you are using kibble, put 5 in, give it to your dog. As soon as they empty it, pick it back up, put another 5 in, give it back to your dog. So that way you can get maybe 10 or 15 repetitions of just your dog's learning that food goes in the Kong, I get the Kong, I eat the Kong. So we're just kind of, it's almost like muscle memory, but we're just sort of teaching them that that's what happens when I get the Kong. There's always food in it. So, basically after doing that, most dogs are going to be pretty hooked to the Kong anyway. So at that point, we can start to move to some more difficult recipes. And that's where some of the stuffing and things like that would get involved. So I've mentioned kibble, but you do not have to use kibble. Right now, my dogs are on a raw diet, but I put in sort of a inexpensive, no-name brand fruits and vegetables, or fruits, I guess, mostly berries, so sort of light calories, low calorie option. I stuff that in first, then I put the raw food in, and then I give it to them. So that's what they get. If your dog doesn't get raw, I tend to like the lower calorie options. So and frozen vegetables are inexpensive, so I like that. So you put some peas in, or broccoli, or like I said, the frozen berry mix I like, but anything you want you can put in, bananas, apples, chop them up. So those are good. You can also put dog treats in, kibble, canned food, so lots of different options. But what I really wanted to talk about, so once you've introduced it with that, 5 kibbles, maybe you put half a cup in, and you can give that to them and leave them for the day, or just kind of introduce it. But really, the more you put in here, almost the faster it's going to come out, and they're going to empty it that much quicker. So that was sort of a place I got stuck with Tess when she was a puppy. So that's kind of why I wanted to create this podcast episode, because I think there's probably a lot of people in the same boat. So I'd put her regular breakfast in here, so I don't know what it was, half a cup or a cup of food, and of course she dumps it upside down, and she's got all the food out in about 30 seconds. So that doesn't give her much time to really settle in and get used to the idea that I'm going. So I'm kind of giving it to her in her kennel and running out the door as soon as I possibly can. So that's not really great for either of us, but it is kind of where you have to start. So I wanted to keep it easy for her, so that's what I did, just kind of loose kibble in here, and give it to her. So after we put our 5 treats in, then we go to their whole breakfast ration in there, but they're going to dump it very, very quickly, because as you can see, there's not much to that. It's pretty easy to just empty it and dump it. So from there you can go to more challenging recipes. So that's where I would start to mix in, if you're still using the kibble, you could mix in peanut butter, you could mix in canned dog food, you could just take their regular kibble and put that in a bag overnight and soak it with some water, so that'll kind of cause the kibble to expand a bit, and then you can kind of put that in there so they're getting a little extra water while they eat the kibble, which is good for them. So you can do a bunch of things like that just to make it a little bit more challenging. If I was to take just regular kibble, even say I fill let's say I put about 5 freeze-dried treats in the bottom, so that's going to fill it up to the first third, and then I could put, I'll say the next line, so this portion here, I'm going to put in just loose kibble again, and then this portion up top, I'm going to mix canned dog food and kibble together in a bowl, and then I'm going to stuff it in here. So if you do that, that's going to be a much harder recipe. They've kind of got a lick to pull all the kibble out, they've got a lick to get the canned food out, and then they hit kind of that kibble jackpot, and then at the very end, to reward them for working at it, they get the freeze-dried treats. So something like that can work for a good beginner recipe. Like I said, you could also use peanut butter, so you could put your kibble in and then just top it up with a little bit of peanut butter on the top to kind of seal it. Cheese Whiz, Kong does make some different kind of squeeze out pastes that you can use as well. But you don't have to get too crazy with it. Baby food works, whatever you choose to use will work fine. Anything kind of human edible, dog edible, you can certainly put in there, and that'll work. But again, some dogs, as soon as you make it that little bit more challenging, it's just too big of a leap to them, let alone, like at this point, we're not freezing it, we're not doing anything else, but just mixing our canned food and our kibble, sometimes it's just hard enough that our dogs give up. And that's what happened to me and Tess. So, as I said, I was putting kind of a cup of food in the Kong, giving it to her, but she was emptying it very quickly. But I found if I tried to go up to soaked kibble or frozen kibble or something along those lines, mixing different things in to make it a little bit harder, she would just give up. So what do you do when that happens? And I think that's pretty common. Some dogs, if they're a real food hound, probably not going to be an issue. You could probably go to freezing their Kongs, stuffing it, mixing it, freezing it, and they're still going to work hard to get out every last morsel. But for some dogs that aren't that motivated by food, or are just that much more stressed by the fact that you've left the house, we're going to need an in-between step. So that's where I really like these next toys. So I'm calling them here the Squirrel Dude and the Kong Genius. There may be others, but these are kind of a couple options. So that's the Squirrel Dude. And you can see on the inside here, it's got some little, I don't know what to call them, tongs, feet, but little rubber nubs. So if I take that same cup of kibble that I was putting in the Kong and I put it in this toy, it's going to take a lot longer for a dog to empty. So instead of taking the 30 seconds to dump out this red Kong, if we use the Squirrel Dude, it's just going to take a little while longer. Tess. If we use the Squirrel Dude, it's going to take a little bit longer. So, the Squirrel Dude might give us 5 or 10 minutes to empty the Kong. It really depends on your dog. Kind of the shape of the kibble depends too. Like that's still a fairly big hole. So if you have really tiny kibble, it might come out more quickly. I've also found like the flatter, they almost look like coins, but the flatter disc type kibble also comes out pretty easily just because those holes are pretty big. So that's an option. So that's the Squirrel Dude. And then this one is the Kong Genius. So I can't remember which one. There's 2 different Genius types. I don't recall off the top of my head if this is the Mike or the Leo, but there's 2 different types, and they work kind of the same way. So this one's just a cylinder, and same thing, when I fill it up, I just kind of put my hand to cover the big hole there, and then I just dump the kibble in at the top, and then I can give that to my dog on their bed. And sort of the same idea. It's just going to extend that eating time from 30 seconds to maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. But it's going to give your dog a little bit more chance to de-stress as they eat, and again, give you more time to leave the house. So I really like those 2 toys for that. And like I said, it's a great in-between step from the Kong to some of the more challenging frozen recipes. So usually once they get used to working for this, they can go to a more challenging Kong recipe, but sometimes it's hard to just skip right to that harder Kong recipe. So that's what we're going to use these for. You can see these still have fairly big holes. This one's going to be a little bit harder or easier to get through in the very center, but some of those coin or disc shaped kibble are going to fall through here pretty easily. And same story if you have like puppy kibble that's really teeny tiny, or a dog under 10 pounds, something like that. This is the large size. The smaller size, of course, does have a little tinier holes, but for both of these, any really teeny tiny kibble is going to come out pretty easily. So it's still not going to be super challenging, but it does bridge that gap. It's harder with the Genius here, but with the Squirrel Dude, you can pull some of these plastic bits out a little bit and just use your regular kind of household scissors to cut them down if you do want to make it easier for your dog. So if they are struggling with those, you can cut them down a little bit. And that's sort of between the two. what I would use to decide which one is right for your dog. And both of these do come in, smaller sizes, but if you do have a dog that's, say, under 20 pounds or 10 pounds, get the smaller size for sure. But both of these, I would say, are not as durable as the regular Kong. So the other Kong Genius, which I don't have in front of me here, but it's a little bit shaped like a Kong, and then it has a long neck coming out of it. And Riggs did chew through that longer neck, so I don't think this rubber is as durable as the red Kong, and definitely not the black Kong, but it probably is similar to the puppy or the senior. So if you have a dog that's really durable, so if you have a dog that's a really extreme chewer, tough chewer, really hard on toys, neither of these is probably a great option, but at least unsupervised. But if they're sort of average with toys, these can work really well. So if you have a more tough dog that's a little tougher on toys, I would go with the Kong over the Squirrel Dude. Riggs did chew the top off one of these guys. I think it's just a little softer rubber. So between the two, I'd say the Kong is a little bit more durable, but still, not as durable as the red or the Extreme Kong. And then the Squirrel Dude's a little bit softer. So again, probably similar to like the puppy Kong rubber-wise. But if you do have tinier kibble, the Squirrel Dude might be a better option. And if you do want some adjustment, I would get the Squirrel Dude, because you can cut those down if you do need to make it easier for your dog. So between the two, that's how I would choose. If you need to make it easier, or you have I'll say giant kibble for some reason, and you need it to come out, this might be a better option. But either or. So a little less durable toy, this would be the more durable option, and then just more adjustment versus there's not much adjustment you can do with the Kong Genius. So that's that too. And again, from there, once your dog's confident with that, if they're eating all of their kibble out of that, they're staying engaged with those toys, then I would switch back to the Kong and just start to work on some more challenging recipes. Again, just to get your dog more settled down and just get a little more bang for your buck. I mean, you're feeding them the same kibble anyway, so it's better for them, I think, mentally to have that outlet and sort of mental exercise, emptying the Kong for, say, 30 minutes versus 5 minutes, and the kibble and the food and the calories are exactly the same. So it's just how much bang for the buck you're getting entertainment wise. One thing I should say with the sort of more in between step with the Squirrel Dude or the Genius, they do really still reward your dog for playing with them. The kibble still comes out fairly easily. They have to kind of interact with it a little bit, but it's going to fall out regularly enough to reward them to keep engaging with the toy. So that's why we like it and they like it. So that's good, where they might not be getting enough reward out of a more challenging Kong recipe. So that's usually why they quit playing. But these are a little bit more active toys. So I find most dogs with the Kong will just lay down on their bed or wherever you allow them to eat it, and just kind of quietly work away to try and get the kibble out of the Kong. But with some of these toys, there might be a little more motion involved, so they might drop it and kind of roll it and paw it around. So if you're feeding in a kennel, I'd say, if your dog will eat the Kong's maybe a better option, just because they're a little more quiet and stay in one place. But if your dog kind of, maybe they're older, they have the run of the house, but you still want to give them something when you leave, this can still work really well. But I find my dogs are a little more active. They're not quite as quiet when they play with those types of toys, just because there's more, if they just drop it and bat it around a little bit, they're going to knock out more pieces than if they just sit down and try and eat it. So it's a little more active toy than the Kong. So from there, the last kind of toy I wanted to talk about was these feeding balls and toys. So there are a ton of different options here. I've got a couple here with me, but the Kong Wobbler is one of my favorite. If you have a dog that is hard on toys, I'd say this is probably your best bet. It's harder plastic, So it's going to stand up to harder chewers a little better. But there's two sizes in these. So this is the large size. There is a smaller size, but still, if you have a really tiny dog, say under 10 pounds, the small size might be hard for them to use. So if you have a really tiny dog, that might not be the best option, but for durableness, I'd say this is your best bet. This is Kong Wobbler. Another Kong toy. I'm drawing a blank here on what it's called right now. The gyro. So this is another one I really like. Again, it's harder plastic. The centerpiece probably is not as durable, but it's easy to fill, easy to clean, so I like that aspect. And it twists on, so like I said, easy to fill. And then there's just one little hole, so they have to kind of spin this and also use the red part to roll it around. So Kong Gyro, another option. That can work well with small dogs. This is the first one that I used with Tess as a puppy. I think it's called the Omega Paw. You've probably seen these a bunch. They're pretty inexpensive, a little softer toy. So if you have a dog that does throw their toys around quite a bit and you don't want them destroying furniture, something like this can be a good option. Easy to fill. The one thing I don't care for with these toys, they're not very easy to clean. So it's pretty easy to fill, but it's not very easy to clean. So like this one still has some stuff in it. There is a way you can kind of pull this neck. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little neck in there which does help keep the treats all from falling out at once, but which is good. But there is a neck in there, so it's a challenge, but if you can pull it out, you can cut that neck down, so if you make it shorter, it's going to be easier for the food to come out, and if you leave it longer, it'll be more challenging. So depending on your dog's interest level and how much reward they need to stay engaged, this is a good option because it does have a little bit of flexibility that way. One reason I like it and wanted to mention it, it's pretty reasonable price-wise, and it is soft, so it's a nice option for, like I said, just around the house if your dog tends to throw it and you don't want them doing damage. That's a good choice. And if you're just kind of new to some of the interactive feeding toys, just being a little bit less pricey, it's a good way to start. So so that's a good option. On the softer side still, this is the Obi Snoop. And this is the larger version. There is a little bit smaller one. So you can open it up so you can fill it. And then when they play with it, there's that little lip from that neck that's going to keep all the treats from falling out at once. So that'll extend the playtime a bit. And like I said, it's pretty soft. So if you're in an apartment, don't want it making a ton of noise, disrupting your neighbors, or have them destroy the house if they throw their toys around, this is another good option. A little pricier than the Omega Paw, but it is a nice option. Again, easy to clean, easy to fill, so I like that. And to make it more challenging, you can buy these little balls, or even put a Kong in, stuff a Kong in, and just kind of, so then it's a two-piece toy. If you really jam that in good, then they have to kind of empty the Kong, pull out the Kong, and empty their toy. Or you can use these are this kind of specialty balls. I don't remember what they call them off the top of my head, but they're made by Obi, and you can put them inside. So if I leave it, so this one would be pretty easy. If I leave it like that, it's not gonna make it much more challenging, but a little more challenging. But if I turn it a little bit, so something like that, it's going to be a lot harder for the kibble to fall out, so the dog's going to have to work a little bit harder. So that's another option. It's kind of a little on the softer side. And then there's a whole bunch of ball type toys, all very similar. I find with a lot of these, they are easy to fill, not so easy to clean. So if you have a dog with allergies, that's one of the reasons I kind of look for a toy that's easy to clean. So if you're doing different food trials, it's easy to empty the food, put something new in, and you're not worried about anything left over that might wreck your feeding trial, where, you know, something like this, there's a couple extra kibble that they haven't managed to get out that might disrupt your feeding trial. So if your dog doesn't have allergy issues that you're dealing with, it's not a big worry. Pretty much any feeding ball you pick up, feeding toy you can pick up, will do the job. I didn't grab one here, but I really like the Kong Bamboo. There's a ball and there's a dumbbell version. So I think it's one size kind of fits all. So for the ball, if you have a really tiny dog, I wouldn't get the ball, I'd get the dumbbell. Just make sure you get a smaller size. But for an average kind of 30 plus pound dog, even probably 20 pounds plus, you can use the ball. But what I like about it, so this is another Kong product, the tennis ball. It doesn't open. One reason I wanted to try it because I wanted to see if it did. It does not. But the Bamboo does open kind of like this gyro does. So it's a 2-piece ball like that. So it's easy to clean out, easy to put food in, but you're not going to be able to see it on here, but it does have, like this tennis ball version, it does have little lines or kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but little catches, little indents that will slow the kibble from falling out. So it's going to be a little bit more challenging, I think. I'd like to test them all, so I've been meaning to get to a test for a while, so stay tuned for that. I will post it when it becomes available, but from what I see of it, it looks like it's going to be a little harder for the kibble to fall out. So again, just extending that play time with your dog, kind of, but using the same amount of kibble. So I love that. The longer we can let them kind of play and explore and work for their food, I think the more mental stimulation they have, and the better for them, better for us. So it's nice to have them busy and occupied, not fretting about us being away and at work, and even just with everything everybody's going through with COVID right now, if you're on a conference call, if you've got a meeting going on, and your dog's constantly pestering you like my guys will do, if you can give them something like the gyro or the wobbler, pretty easy to throw in, their kibble, half their kibble for the day, and they'll just go working, knocking this thing around, trying to get the food out for 20 minutes while you're on the phone call, and give you some kind of peace and quiet so you can focus on what you need to do with work. So that would be my recommendation. So between all the toys I showed you today with the kind of feeding ball type toys, like I said, cost effectiveness, I've found the Omega Paw ball to be probably the most cost effective. But I really like the Kong Gyro. My favorite right now is probably the Kong Bamboo, which I didn't grab, so I'm sorry for that. But the Kong Bamboo, the Kong Gyro, or Kong Wobbler for most dogs. And the Gyro and the Wobbler are probably going to be best for our more durable toys. And then if you want something quieter, like I said, the Omega Paw or the Snoop. So either of those, I don't think you can go too wrong with any of them. Outward Hound also has a ball that works well. I think it's Nina Ottosman. I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering that, but another ball that works really great. It's hard plastic and then has 2 holes for the kibble to come out. So if your dog needs a little bit more encouragement, that can be a really good option for them. Just make it nice and easy. So those would be my recommendations. Like I said, softer toy, if you want your dog to not destroy the house or irritate your neighbors, and then something like the Wobbler for more durable toys. But pretty much any of the ones you pick up at the pet store is better than nothing. We do sell them through my company, High Drive, but if you're looking for something more immediate and want to go to the pet store, by all means. I just wanted to give you this information. I find, you go to that particular aisle at any pet store, and it's so overwhelming. There's so many choices. There's a lot of bad choices. There's a lot of things you can waste your money on. So just kind of hoping to save you a little bit of money and headache, and kind of give you my thoughts and what's worked for me. So like I said, though the Tricky Treat Omega Paw Tricky Treat ball is not my favorite, it does the trick, and it's a great place to start. So while I wouldn't buy one again for my dogs, probably it's a good option for a few different things. So that's it. So that's what we talked about today. So we went through the Kong. Like I said, there's 4 different Kong types: the classic, the extreme, the puppy, and the senior. So you know, puppy and senior are obviously more age-based with the naming, but any dog that maybe has a more sensitive, maybe have had jaw issues or has more sensitive gums or teeth, can use the puppy or senior. It's just a softer rubber. The extreme works really well for bully breeds or harder dogs that are harder on toys, and then the classic for your average dog. So those are kind of the four different Kong versions. And again, if you go to myhighdrivedog.com, I do have a bunch of recipes that if you put your email address in, we'll just email you that resource, and it's 21-day kind of guide to what you can feed your dog and get them to love their Kong and to give you that time to get you out of the house. So go check that out. So we talked about the Kong. I think that's, like I said, if I only could buy one, I would buy the Kong. But if your dog is struggling between, you know, the easy Kong recipes and the harder Kong recipes, and you're just not getting that time you need to get out of the house guilt-free, and your dog's not getting the time they need to really kind of change their mental state, change their energy, you know, give them something to focus on rather than stress about. If you're having a hard time making that switch between easier and harder recipes with the Kong, that's when I would give the Squirrel Dude or Kong Genius a try. From my experience, I would say the Squirrel Dude is a little bit softer rubber, but you can adjust those nubs, like I said. So if you feel like you might need to, the Squirrel Dude might be your better choice. And then the Kong Genius I've found to be a little bit more durable. So in general, that one's probably my favorite, but it does have those little narrow kind of slats so in it. So if you have a really sort of coin or disc-like kibble that's fairly narrow, your kibble's going to come out pretty easily. So just keep that in mind. You're probably going to have that same issue with the Squirrel Dude. It's not, if anything, it has bigger holes, but either of those is really going to help just slow down how quickly your dog can empty, I'll say, a Kong type toy, but it's just going to slow down the rate of release. So it'll give you a little bit more time to get out of the house, and give your dog some more time to play with their toy, and a little bit more mental enrichment for your buck. So either of those two. And then the feeding balls and toys we've talked about. So Kong Wobbler's probably one of my top favorites. Especially for a more durable option. It can be a little noisy as the dog kind of rocks it across your hardwood floor. So if noise or I'll say destruction is a concern, that's when I would look to the Omega Paw Tricky Treat Ball or the Orby Snoop. So those were the 2 softer toys I talked about. And then sort of just for your average dog, I also like the Kong Genius, the Kong Gyro and the Kong Bamboo. So those would be my top recommendations if you're looking at a toy, but really love any interactive feeding toy. So if for some reason you can't find any of these toys, just go to your local pet store and pick anything from that aisle. It'll help your dog immensely if they're stressed about you leaving the house, or they're dealing with some separation anxiety issues. So, you know, the worst thing you can do is to do nothing. So go pick one at random if you need to. Close your eyes, point to it, and pick it up. You know, any of them are going to help your dog more than nothing. So, you know, that's my thoughts on the different toys that are available. But just go pick one up. You know, it's going to do wonders for your dog. And of course, you can buy them from us at High Drive if you'd like as well. But just pick one up wherever you can, however you can. It'll help your dog immensely and make you feel a little less guilty about leaving them home alone. And it's not fun to come home to a destroyed house or just a stressed out dog. So anything we can do to make their lives a little bit better, that seems to be you know, our motto. Like I work so my dogs can have the life they deserve, and I think for many of you that's the same case. So So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I really just hope that helps eliminate a bunch of stress from your life and from your dog's life if you can put these to use. And as I said, there's that resource at myhighdrivedog.com if you want to download that 21-day Kong recipe guide. Go take advantage of that. That'll help you introduce the Kong. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in the YouTube comments. You can just send us an email, whatever, however you'd like to get a hold of us on Facebook, email, whatever. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to answer them. I know it probably took me a couple years to really figure it out by trial and error. I had some really good trainers that helped me as well, give me different ideas, but everything was kind of, piecemeal, a little bit here, a little bit there. So I wanted to do this podcast just to kind of put it all in one place and give you some food for thought to think about so you could determine what would work best for your dog. So thanks for joining us. If you'd like to sign up for the Dog Sport Decoded email list, we do often throw out a bunch of different bonuses related to that. You can sign up on the Dog Sports Decoded website, just dogsportsdecoded.com, and then you'll be guaranteed to get all your little bonus material and some little extras every week. So thanks for joining me today, and have a great weekend, everybody.